What's up, golfers? This is the Pace of Change.
It's about family, it's about fitness, it's about fun, and it's about fast.
It's about changing perceptions about the sport of golf. Golf is a fitness sport.
To offer experiences that consumers want.
This is something I've never ever thought of playing, but I actually really think it would be fun.
I had to wait 25 minutes on that tee box. The fact that I'm not doing anything about this is the reason that it persists.
It is undeniably different.
Welcome back, golfers, to the Pace of Change Golf Podcast. I'm Scott Dawley, your co-host, and along with Dude Spellings, we are broadcasting the evolution of golf in the 21st century. So how do we do that? Well, each week we interview and profile the pioneers, the entrepreneurs, the thought leaders, the revolutionaries, and the difference makers in and around the game of golf. Guests like last week's Futurist Trends and Innovation keynote speaker Jim Carroll, Insta-famous swing instructor George Gankis, Alex Van Allen, Roberto and Laura Balestrini, two pioneers of new hybrid sports in the world of golf. We've had world champion speed golfers, track and field Olympic medalists, and revolutionaries like Rob O'Loughlin of Soft Spikes, Brett Blakely of Encore Golf, Bob Babbitt of Competitor Group. We've even had elite performance coaches and athletic trainers like Alan Phillips, Jacob Bowden, and Logan Schwartz on the podcast. Hey, by the way, our library of past episodes, including copious notes and links, can be found on our website, paceofchange.com. Be sure while you're there to check out the social feed, stay up to speed, visit our sponsors and affiliates page to find great deals on products and services made for and designed by 21st century golfers just like you. So look, we want to invite you to join the Pace of Change. Join that faster golf movement whenever you play, however you play. Pick up the pace and accelerate your game. Alright, today's guest comes from the land of Oz. We're talking with the Boz from Oz, Jr. that is. The son of accomplished Australian amateur golfer Bill Bosley, an accomplished golfer in his own right, part of a golfing family that actually reaches back over 50 years into the very fabric of the game of Australia today. We got Wayne Bosley of Vision Golf Australia here on the podcast. Now, Vision Golf has been enhancing the visibility of golf balls since 2004, and they've come a long way in 12 years. The tech, engineering, and creative thinking behind Vision golf balls is pretty amazing. But it's not as simple as chemistry and ball flight laws. Alright, this isn't a podcast about how Wayne has manufactured the best ball you've never played. Believe me, he knows more about golf balls and the golf industry than maybe anyone in the world. That's not an overstatement. But we didn't talk as much about how to manufacture a better ball or play a better game as much as we dove right into the deep side of things, of running a business, the place inside where groundbreaking innovations come from, the long journey that lies ahead of any wide-eyed startup founder, taking advantage of the bad lies, bouncing back from the unfortunate bounces, knowing when to play it down and knowing when to pick up, take the X, and head to the next hole. So how do we manufacture a life worth living? How do we perform better at the game of life? These are the questions. This is the vision behind Vision. So for the Bosleys, the question that drives them is not how do they make a ball that makes your game better? How do they make a ball that makes your life better? All right, let's get into it. Wayne, it's good to see you. Good to finally meet you.
Yeah, been a while too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was back at last year in 2015, I started another venture called Links Run, and we were just running on the golf course, but it was really a golf evangelism tool. We were starting and finishing all of our events on the driving range, and we'd have free range balls and rental clubs, and we even had a golf professional that was there to give, beginner lessons. So one of the prizes I wanted to give was your golf ball. So I ordered a bunch of them and then gave them away. I've still got some, but gave them away as prizes. And, these are all, actually a significant majority of the people who came to our races had never been to a golf course or played golf.
Okay.
So it worked out perfectly for us because that's the type of customer that we're actually trying to get to the golf course, is somebody who really only has perceptions about the game without having the experience. And so by having them on the golf course, their perceptions about what golf is are automatically changed.
Yeah.
And if they were negative in the past, typically they leave our events and they're very positive. It's, whether it was just, hey, the surroundings are beautiful, or I got to run on the grass, or whatever, they're associating positive experiences and positive feelings with being at a golf course.
So the golf industry doesn't do any of that.
They don't, but part of why we have this podcast is because there are actually people all over the world that do care, and they're not communicating. There are people all over the world that are entrepreneurs and pioneers and people that want to grow the game of golf. They just want to do it outside of the box, outside of the industry.
Yeah, no, it's true, because it's got to be grassroots back up. It's not going to be coming from the top down.
What is your earliest memory of the game?
My father was a really good player as an amateur, and I was about 5 years old, and I don't remember being younger than that when I was playing, but I was.
Wow.
And Dad worked in the golf industry from 1960, so this is 1965. On Sundays, he would take me, and he was playing with the best top 3 players in Victoria, and they would let me play behind them. So they'd tee off about 6:45 in the morning, and I would play as many holes as I could keep up with them. Yeah, and primarily I played 18 holes as a 5-year-old with one club. So the thing that I always remember about that is Dad always took me to the shopping centre supermarket afterwards, and I got there's a chocolate bar we had called Cherry Ripe, and I remember that more than I do the golf.
Right, exactly. That's the perfect example of, I think, what we're trying to accomplish. Really what we're trying to do is be an interface between the golf world, the golf industry, and the outside world. We've got to create these little gateways and these little pathways for people to come in and out. So we have to serve as the interface in either the products that we're offering or the services or formats or whatever we're doing.
Yeah, well, when I look at if the larger playing population of golf are non-handicap players. So I think it's more than 90% of all golfers don't have a handicap.
Right.
So when you look at that, there's a void. And it's a definite void between information that may help them enjoy the game and just finding out, and us finding out how we get to talk, explain to them how it could be a bit different than what they think in the organized golf world.
That just reminds me, somebody had asked you, so what's your vision, behind the concept? And I thought,
don't you love it as a generic word, though?
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Yeah.
But, you believe strongly that the product that you're making, this ball that you're producing, is going to have an enormous effect on recreational golfers and amateur golfers, the 90% that don't have a handicap, because they're going to be able to enjoy the game better. They're going to develop better as a player. But then this jumped out at me and as a person. And I thought, wait a minute, he just made the connection between playing a certain type of golf ball and being a better type of person. And I think it's easy really quickly for people to go, that's overreach in marketing. But the more I thought about it, I thought, because your next line says play a better game and you'll be a happier person, But it really is true. And I don't, like I said, on the one hand, I think people can look at that and go, he's just overreaching on marketing. But on the other hand, I really believe that's your heart. That what you're doing, the love that you have for what you're doing, is so that ultimately people's lives will be changed, albeit through a golf ball.
And, the whole thing is with golf, everyone's confused about what golf is. Golf is one of the greatest recreational activities that you can have for a lifetime. And it has a sense of community. I can have my father play with his grandsons and they can spend 2 hours, 3 hours on a golf course. But I'm thinking now, you're aiming at the 9-hole type thing, because kids don't really want to spend 4.5 hours, even 20-year-olds, they don't want to spend that time just locked into playing a game. Mm-hmm. But I know my father can therefore have something in common with my kids. And even when you don't talk, you're doing something together and you're in an environment where it's just them. And it changes a lot of the relationship things that we're finding the way the world is now. it's really hard to achieve. Where's the things that the kids have that they want to talk to their grandparents about? Where's the things that I want to spend time with my dad that we can go and do? And fortunately for us, it was always we could go play golf. Mum talked more about golf to me than Dad did. And then anything else sort of filters through the conversations, but you're having conversations.
Yeah, that's it. It's about relationships. It's about people. It's not about a golf ball in the end, is it?
No, it's not about sport, and it's not about me selling something.
Right.
But here's the big deal with golf. It's really hard to get going. It's really hard. And it's really hard to feel like you belong on a golf course. And the easier we make that, the more people we get that will stay the distance and find all the benefits that I think golf brings to life. But you just got to get them past the initial hurdles.
You take me back, it's the 70s, you're playing golf, your dad is in the business. Do you remember the environment back then with respect to things like pace of play or golfer participation, numbers up and down? Were people talking about that back then as well?
I grew up in Singapore from 7 to 17, so I went into a different environment again, and it was actually good for me because I went into an environment where that was Singapore was in major change. They went independent in '66. It's multicultural, but it's sort of multicultural that was working. I was in a minority group, but previously you were a really elite minority group, and as a kid, that was starting to get washed away because once you weren't in your house or at your school, you were just a part of the normal population. So you got to experience a lot of things from a way different perspective. And I like that. Yeah. So that changed me forever. So if you said to me, have I walked a mile in someone else's shoes? I think I've done it a few times in that period of time. And that's the right time because 7 to 17, the impressions that are made at that time stick with you forever.
That's your worldview. That's the basis, the foundation of the way that you view the world.
Yeah. So, but because we were golfers and we were always golfers and Mum was always very sporty. So it's an elite sport. It's not always that welcoming to a lot of people. In the 70s in Asia, even today, golf is a very elitist sport. Golf's sort of been hanging on to this elitist thing in a lot of countries, and it doesn't need to be. What we've got in Australia, anyway, if you look at the way I looked at it then, it was numbers weren't relevant. There wasn't as many golf courses. So, and they could charge enough on those membership fees to run the golf courses, and labour was reasonably priced. So the actual running of a business, being the golf club golf courses, it worked, but the amount of opportunities to play as a non-member in a more public forum. Singapore had one little par 3 golf course, and then a few of the old army bases had golf courses that were a bit cheaper, but it was an elitist sport.
If you look here in the States back in the 70s, there were, I think I've got an article from 1978 that could be published in 2016. I mean, it's the exact same type of language used today, back in the late 70s, 1978, talking about slow play and how the game is just too slow and people are leaving the game because it's too slow. So it just amazes me. For 3 decades here, it's been an issue, and yet to look at where the state of the game is today in terms of its lack of evolution, in a sense, as a sport.
No, it's regressed.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. Dad, but it's different. My role model was, say, my father. His thing was, and I've got 2 younger sisters, his deal on the weekend was he played Saturday and Sunday. I mean, my dad used to travel a lot, half the year. So I always wanted to do things with him because he wasn't always there.
Right.
But he wanted to play first thing on Sunday morning. And if they were playing like club championship match play, he could get through a round in 2 hours 15, 2 hours 20, serious golf, but but you know the other one, it's not the end of the world golf. So it's like I'm doing it, I'm competing, and I'm going home, and then I can go and participate with my family doing the normal things, but I still got to play golf today.
Yes, exactly. It's like I've already accepted the outcome before I even go. I'm going, I'm going to have fun, I'm going to win, or I'm going to lose.
Yep, and then I'm going home, but I got to play golf today.
Right, exactly. That's so true.
Yeah.
So, all right. So then, you went to university.
No. So my thing's a bit different than a lot of people, especially from an American. When I was 15 and 16, I was juniors in the 70s was a bit different. You had under 21s. You didn't have under 18s. So as a 14 and 15-year-old, I was the national champion in Singapore, and I was the captain of their national junior team. And when I was 15, I played in the Singapore national team with my father, and I played number one for that team at times. Okay, so but my father was a better golfer than I was, and I didn't really want to beat my father. But when I hit 15, I'd grown to I was just under 6 foot. I should have won the National Long Drive Championship. I was with a persimmon driver, steel shaft, wound golf ball. In the qualifying, I hit it 315 yards. I had a hole-in-one in a Pro-Am par 4, 304 yards uphill.
Oh my goodness!
Okay, so I did all this stuff. And there I was. We're thinking I've got I'll turn professional. No, I'm already thinking.
Yeah.
I got asked at school. I'm gonna play professionally.
Yeah.
And at the end of being 16, things changed with the business Dad was in, and he got recalled to Sydney, Australia. And my whole world just changed because I was a big fish in a little pond.
Right.
You come to Australia, there's a lot of talent. Sydney and Melbourne have got most talent in Australia, and Queensland and Brisbane up in Queensland. It took me a while to work out how I wasn't exactly special. And it's that stage of life too life's like a marketing campaign sometimes. It's a balloon. You get a lot of hot air into it. But when there's one doubt and it pricks it, it's really hard to puff it up again.
It's so true.
So it took me years to get over that. But anyway, here's the thing. I was finishing I tried to finish 2 years of high school in 1 year in Australia because it's a different time way that it works. Singapore worked a bit like the US, finish at the end of June, have summer holiday. In Australia, we finish at the end of November and have Christmas as our summer holidays.
Yeah.
So I tried to do 1 year and a couple months, and then I tried to do the next year. But in that time, Dad found he had been working as his own manager doing Southeast Asia and working for about 6 different golf companies.
He was just repping all their different products and lines?
Yeah, well, Colgate-Palmolive had a group of sports companies. And they had bought the company that he originally worked with, so he then was taking responsibility for their brands, and that was Ram, Penfold Golf, PGF Australia, Keith Knox Australia, Bancroft Tennis out of America, Trayton Tennis out of Sweden.
Would he just would he work exclusive distribution agreements with them and be the sole?
Well, he worked for Colgate's directly because he got on really good with the CEO.
Okay, so
David
he was an employee. Yeah, so he worked there.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. So he went into the corporate America world, and he learned so much from that one experience. So he was pretty close to the NJ Nabisco sort of corporation, right?
Yeah.
It was okay. So Dad's got a really good movie script in him. I can tell you that much.
Oh,
it's really. Okay, so he's been this great golfer, a lot of respect because he's a golfer, did the whole of Southeast Asia up to Japan. We come back to Sydney. He was a 9-to-5 employee working on international sales, and it sort of broke his heart because in Asia he was someone. He'd won 8 national championships. He played the Asian circuit as an amateur. He didn't turn professional, broke a few fingers when he was young, got married when he was 21. It was like he did the responsible, and you weren't sure how much money you're going to make as a player. But my dad was a very good player, but a really great competitor. So he wasn't sure what to do, and there was an opportunity to take on the Titleist business because they didn't have any real distribution in Australia and New Zealand. So in that last few months of my high school, he said to me, "Do you want to come work with me and we'll try and do this?"
How did you come across that? I wonder, working for them, how, I guess he's in the business, so he's got all the networks and the contacts.
So what it is, the original Canadian and Hawaiian distributor for Acushnet, Herb Patterson, had the Atonic agency in Canada. And he had met Bill my father on a few occasions. He's the one that said, "I think I can get this deal and we can do it together." The worst thing was the deal was done. That was fine. And here's these things where people open the door for you. This guy's sort of got my dad to do everything. Didn't put any capital in, takes a percentage of it because he opened the door. We worked really hard for a few years and then Dad had to buy him out and he never really helped, but he got us the opportunity. That's that. You learn. It was an experience. Yeah, but we worked for them for 20 years doing the distribution.
I think about Greg Norman, and I remember, one of the things that he did was set up some sort of distribution channel for Australia for a certain brand of products. It was Cobra?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll get, because my father's looped into the whole Australian industry forever.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter Thompson, 5 British Opens, family friend. Kel Nagel, 1 British Open, family friend. They all used to really treat my father with they were like a family.
Yeah.
And the whole community, that's how I got brought into golf. And all the people that were the icons and the leaders, they treated you like you were part of this entity, which has been so fragmented by the selfie generation. And, so celebrity's big nowadays, but it's not, that's being given the power. But, it should be about the whole, and it's not that. Anyway, let's talk Greg Norman. Greg Norman did it. My father originally, when I was born, we were in Sydney. Dad was 21, Mum was 19. He'd been working for a golf company for 3 years, and an opportunity came up to move to Melbourne. They didn't know anyone, and I'm 1 month old. And Tom Crow, who was going to go and do his own thing, who ends up being the guy that sets up Cobra, who ends up being the guy that after 20 years, 25 years of became an overnight sensation in America after going broke a few times in the way, makes millions and millions of dollars selling his business to Titleist or Fortune Brands. But he did a deal with Greg in the 90s. That he gave him some shares in the business if he played the Cobra clubs. And at that time, Greg asked for the distribution rights for Australia and New Zealand. And at that time, he had a guy that had given him the idea that he should become the biggest golf, wholesaler in Australia as well. So Greg set up that thing in the 90s.
Okay.
So it just how that dovetails into my story. In 1999, they wanted to become the biggest golf company in Australia, and they went to Titleist, and Titleist had taken on board the responsibilities of running Cobra. $750 million was paid to buy Cobra. It wasn't worth it.
No.
It so wasn't worth it. Part of the cleanup was the fact that there was a lot of international agreements in place, and they hadn't been really fully disclosed. And Wally Uline, that runs Titleist, had to clean them up. And in order to try and clean up the Australia and New Zealand distribution rights, Greg came up with an idea, and we didn't know anything about it.
But you're intimately involved in this decision.
Yeah, so the deal sort of on the surface was he would give, and Greg had 10 years to run on his contract for distribution purposes. He was going to give them for nothing the rights back. What he wanted was an opportunity to be the sole Australian distributor for Acushnet, FootJoy, Pinnacle, Cobra. And it was a smart deal for everyone. And the way our deal was, there was never going to be an equity play. We had an opportunity 6 years earlier to sell the rights of what we were doing, and we were told quite clearly, we will work with the Bosleys, but you're not selling it to anyone else. There isn't anything to sell. Your contract isn't for sale. So we built up their business to a reasonable size after about 20 years, and it got to the stage that it was a tidy finish up, and they didn't totally burn us, but we had a reality check. We were like selling Coca-Cola, but you never really owned anything.
Yeah.
And Greg took over our business, and he didn't ask and we worked with Greg for many years. Dad helped him when he was a young pro. He didn't ask our ideas on anything, and 3 years later, Greg lost everything. And his business shut down about another 12 months after that. So he sort of got set up to lose. Yeah. So that's the Greg Norman thing. So he went from being, I'm going to be the biggest guy doing something, to he went to nothing because Dad still, and yeah, it broke my dad's heart. We didn't find out. Dad had to get on a plane at Christmas time to go and sit in a board meeting to be told that the rumors that we'd been told were true. And it did break his heart because he thought he was the guy that had done so well by them. But, corporate business doesn't have room for that sort of sentiment.
Oh, man, that's painful.
Yeah. So anyway, it broke his heart to a degree, and that was that. But here's go forward. Let's go to.
So that was 99. So that was 99-ish, or in a few years there.
Yep. Yep. So we were done and dusted by the end of June 2000, before the Olympics, and we had tidied up our business. You say to me, wouldn't you just go and find another brand and do it again? My dad, it broke his heart.
Yes, exactly.
So part of the deal was we could stop, and Dad wanted to stop, and they said because they didn't trust, and Wally didn't trust Greg's organization to handle leadership, and Titleist is all about this leadership program, looking after the best amateurs, best coaches, best pros, and service is all what it's about, and you've got to have relationships. They wanted us to work with them for another few years and use our relationships and pay us. And I know it's a compromise. I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So I did it. And Dad did it with me for 18 months. And then when he turned 60, so he's thinking he's an ambassador. It's okay. It was a good compromise. And Dad's a great ambassador. He's just the best front person. But when he turned 60, they didn't even say thank you. You're done.
Yeah.
And when I saw that all happen, I knew that's not really where I want to. That's not the life I want to, and that's not the person I am, and that's not who I want to be. And then, so it wasn't. I made it last because I had to. I wasn't sure financially what I was going to do next. Anyway, Dad went and found some things that we could do together, and we decided in 2004 we'd have a crack again. It's funny, we've done golf balls our whole life, so it's like golf balls make sense. That should be something we can do, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my whole entire life.
All right, guys, episode 31 with Wayne Bosley in the books. I mean, what else do? You got to keep moving on. You got to keep moving forward. We're going to keep moving forward with this podcast with Wayne Bosley very soon. If you're listening in real time, I would go subscribe on iTunes or YouTube, depending on what you listen to, and head over to our website and make sure you're checking it out, because we're not going to wait a week to come out with part 2. I want to bring that to you right away. Look forward to that. Again, if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, head to paceofchange.com. If you're listening in the future, head to part 2 right now. All right, until next time, pick up the pace, play from the heart.